of quiet here, so I think I was just going to release this video. It's off subject as far as machining, lathe or milling or whatever, but I saw a couple of YouTube videos on what is the internet, and these guys are way too young to even know to start talking about what it is. So from someone who's been there, done that, here it is for what it's worth. Like I said, I was surprised at what there was on YouTube explaining what the internet is and the World Wide Web. I have my little cheat sheet here, so I know it's upside down for you guys, but it's more for me. Alright, turn this that way. Now in those videos, or one of the videos, they said that the government had started this, but that's not what I saw taking place. First, what you started with was, this is way back in, where is it? I started in 1978, and this was the computer that I had. There were quite a few companies back then, IMSI, Kremco, North Star, and so on. And I was responsible for building these things and configuring software for printers, the drivers, and so on. So this is what I had, and I still have this guy. I'm not about to get rid of it. But you had this to be, there was no internet or anything like that as of yet, and you used a giant CRT terminal to communicate with things. And what you did was, what I saw, it was not really any government stuff that I stumbled across. It was called the ARPANET, A-R-P-N-E-T, and the ARPANET was just telephone communications between universities, hospitals, and research companies. That's what I had discovered. And what you did was, you used the old-time phone back then, is what there was, where the handset, you dial the phone number of whose computer you wanted to talk to, and you would stick it into what's called an acoustic coupler, where there's the microphone and an earphone, and you'd hear beep-beep-beep, bunch of tones. It's called FSK, frequency shift keying. It would negotiate speeds, start bits, stop bits, and so on, and then it would go. Then you'd be connected to somebody else's computer over the phone line. And if anybody's ever seen the movie The Proposal, where Sandra Bullock is in some pay internet access, you'll hear those tones in the background after she inserts her dime or whatever it was. So, turn this thing over. I need a blank sheet. Oh, because I pulled the sheet away with these. Okay. So there, blank sheet. So you had universities or whatever, hospitals and stuff, and they were all had their own little computer inside. And it was, believe it or not, that computer that I showed you, I had built one for the University of San Diego to put them online, and had installed it in the library. So USD here was part of the ARPANET. So now there was a bunch of different places. I mean, what there was that I had discovered, and I don't know how I did, was a BBS, which was a bulletin board service. Somebody had a computer someplace which was a bulletin board. I found the phone number for it, called it, and it listed phone numbers for various different places. And I had phoned and actually phoned into a computer in a hospital and downloaded a video, very small back then, video of a heartbeat inside of somebody. And it was really awesome back then to do something like that. So everything back then was phone lines, phone numbers, and your computer was DOS based. There were two operating systems. One was DOS, Disk Operating System. The other was CPM, which stood for Command Processor Module. And DOS is what Bill Gates purchased way back then, the rights to develop Windows on. And DOS is still in every copy of Windows today. And I'll take you over here to my computer and show you the DOS and what it all was, because it was all text. You'd have to type. There was no point and click. Alright, hopefully there's not a lot of glare, but probably is. So DOS is in here. Where are you? Run. It's called CMD. It's Command Prompt. This is DOS. It's the same thing as CPM. Let's see. Yeah, it's in the screen. So this is how it was back then. You'd phone into some building or someplace, university that you wanted to connect to, and you'd be able to say like dir, directory. Oh, there's everything that was on here that they have. And you can do things like, I see there's a folder there, a directory called download. So cd, change directory, DOWNLOADS, enter directory, and I can see everything that's in there. And there's some programs you can see in there, videos, and all you'd say is like copy and whatever the file is, and it would copy it down to your computer, and then you could run it, play it, whatever it was. Like I downloaded a video of the heartbeat to say it copied it, and it transferred a copy of it to my computer, and then I just ran the thing. So this is basically how it was back then. Everything was just text-based until Microsoft said, why don't we just make a mouse and make it all point and click. So now you had this ARPANET going, and universities or whatever would share information. They'd put all the information on here, and you could dial in and download some of the stuff. So what happened now later on is they started going to dedicated lines rather than a telephone number. They wanted, I think, more speed or something. So they would have dedicated lines, phone lines, which were over the phone company's network. But it wasn't a phone number. It was constantly wired up. So you'd have like the wires coming into the building, going to some little what do you call it? Some little metal box or whatever out on the street, and they'd connect these wires to these wires, which would go to another metal box somewhere, a junction box, and then it would finally come up out of the street and connect to their computer. But then you had like Harvard here talking to UCSD, and Yale over here wanted in on it. So what they did was, now they'd have these wires and they twist them all together, so to speak. So now they're all on the same set of wires sharing information. But the problem was, how do you talk to a specific building? Because there could be buildings within buildings on the same campuses and more computers. You got the medical building, you got a physics building. So somehow they started just assigning numbers, I'm guessing, to these things, but later on I'll show you what it became. So I guess that's what I should start now. Some point in time, and in this whole thing, once you grasp just how enormous this whole picture gets, and just how cooperative everybody was with everybody to develop this, it's just a massive scale of coordination and everybody in the same boat. So what happened was, alright, somebody figured out or came up with the idea, let's assign numbers. And what they have is what's called an IP address, Internet Protocol. And Internet Protocol consists of 4 octets. 3, 4. and this is called IPv4, version 4. Version 6 is out, but because if you come up with all the numbers that you can come in here, this is out in the billions of an area, so this would allow for a lot of growth on planet Earth for computers. There's a first piece of coordination. Who's going to be responsible for assigning these numbers? There is one organization that raised their hand and say, we would like to be the organization that is responsible for keeping track of numbers and issuing them to people as they request them, and it's called the IANA, which stands for the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority. And what they do is they will make sure that no two places, no two computers have the exact same number. So you got a big responsibility keeping track of all these numbers and where they're going. So so now you have kind of the beginnings of the internet, where buildings, computers are starting to be connected together. They're no longer phone numbers, they're IP addresses, and they're all wired together. Now you can see this growing pretty quickly. Like I said, I started in 1978, and today is 34 years later. So the growth on this thing is phenomenal. They started getting away from using phone lines to dedicated lines for the internet. And also, as this thing grew, because you get more buildings and more buildings and more buildings, these little guys started changing into regular buildings which had what's called routers in place, where a router would say, all right, for instance, let's say this building's IP is 74 point something. This is, okay, yeah, 74.10 something. This building is 74.11, 74.12, point something. So now you'd have to have a router in here watching this traffic moving around, saying, okay, you want 7412, this building wants 7412, well, it's got to go down this wire to this router, which says now you got to go down this wire. So you start routing traffic all over the place, across the country and potentially around the world here, because there could be a hospital in the United Kingdom, there could be another one in Germany that's sharing information, universities. So now you can start seeing packets of information. He says, I want a file off of this guy. So this guy takes the file and puts a wrapper on it, so to speak, where it's the destination address is him. You can say he's 24.10. So this will say the contents of this packet needs to go to 2410, and the routers start going, okay, 2410's down this wire to this router to here, and it finally comes here, and he's listening to the information, and everybody's listening to this packet. This guy goes, they pull the entire data packet into memory, into the computer, and they start looking at the wrapper going, wait a minute, this is for 2410, so he just throws it away. This is not mine. It's not mine. This guy pulled it in, he goes, hey, this is mine. He pulls the wrapper off of it and does what he has to with the contents, which happens to be a data file or something, a text file. So this is basically, even today, how communications work on the internet and the World Wide Web. So the first concept is you've got an organization which is controlling every computer on the planet. It's issuing numbers to different places, and what they're doing, and you can Google this too, is they start assigning the first octet, is this pen dying, to countries. For instance, 124 might be China, and 125 went to the England, 126 went to, and they can take that, like 124, and they can say, you know, I've got 3 more things. They can divide it up if they want and issue it to different computers or whatever they want to do with it in that country. So that's kind of an example that where if you get an email and you want to open it up, you can kind of look at the first digit, first octet of where it came from, and you can see what country it came from, the email. So a lot of different things to that. So now you kind of understand IP addresses, internet protocol, and how things are communicated with numbers. So the next step now is browsers actually started. Microsoft came out, and you've got Firefox, the Microsoft Internet Explorer, Opera, a bunch of different browsers that are out there, and one of them came from AOL. Now AOL actually started in 1983. So you're talking about 78, 79, 80, 5, 6 years for this to grow, and suddenly it's big enough that now AOL started. So now you've got a building here called AOL, and they've got a bunch of computers in here, and they have an IP address. But what they did was, they've got buildings, you know, like in every city. It grew pretty fast. So if you're in Seattle and you paid to join AOL, they're going to give you 3 or 4 phone numbers which are local to your area, and you would phone that number and you'd be talking to a little remote piece of AOL which is connected into the heart of AOL. So here's you, and you're talking to him, and everybody else in Seattle is talking to this phone number which is talking to AOL. Now, there wasn't too many websites or anything back then, so most of it was AOL. They'd have their own little news section that you could browse. You remember You've Got Mail? They had their own mail servers, so you could have an email account and send it to different places that had their own email server, and so on. But now, let's go to a little bit bigger picture. Get another piece of paper here. Alright. So now everything is IP addresses. And what they had back then, it was hilarious, was a phone book. So you had, man, this pen's got a problem. You had AOL someplace here, maybe New York. You had other companies. You had Intel, had their computer. You had Cisco over in Europe. You had universities here, Yale, Harvard, all that. All hardwired, going through routers. You can see how this gets big real fast. You know, this guy is going to here, and this guy might be going to a building here, and also traffic going here, and so on. So it gets really big, but everybody had an IP address, and you had this phone book, and you were using an internet service provider, ISP. So here's me, and I'm connected to, say, Time Warner Cable. Now, using the phone book, I wanted to go over here to Google, and Google was 74.92.168.72. So you look in the phone book for Google, and poof, you would see the Google website, their opening search engine page. Somebody, and this is the next major coordination over somebody taking control of IP addresses, was somebody said, why don't we come up with what's called a DNS server, domain name server. And so here's your DNS server, and what it was is a database. You would get an IP address when you turned your computer on from Time Warner Cable, and Time Warner Cable would give you the IP address of your DNS server. So now when you wanted to go to Google, your computer would ask your DNS server, what's the IP for Google? And it would tell you this number, and your browser would automatically fill in that number, and you'd be connected to Google, and poof. So now you've got, somebody's got to have a master database, because you got Time Warner and you got Cox over here, and Cox, we're not going to use yours. They have their own DNS server sitting here. So lo and behold, a company called Network Solutions right here in San Diego raised their hand and said, we want to be the master DNS database. And everybody all over the planet said, go for it. So believe it or not, there is one master DNS that holds everything there is on the planet. Every website, every server, every bit of information. And usually every night, every 24 hours, Cox will say, give me a copy. Time Warner Cable, so give me a copy. So now if somebody comes up with a new domain, a new computer here, a hosting company, and we have test.com, and our IP address is blah, 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 blah. Well, it's registered here. That's called a registrar. Every domain name is registered and entered into the master DNS, domain name server, and so everybody gets a copy of it. Now, if I'm on Time Warner Cable, I ask my DNS, what's the IP for test.com? Tells it to me, and poof, I've got the test.com website. So, major, you've got one organization controlling the planet, giving everybody IP addresses, and you've got another organization holding every domain name and what its IP address is. Phenomenal. So, phone book went away. This is basically the foundation of what the internet and the World Wide Web is today, which is 34 years after the ARPANET, the first exchange, started taking place over the phone. So what is the internet? I would say the internet is the vehicle. It's the wires, it's the coax, it's the fiber optics, it's all the routers running traffic all over the place. That's what the internet is. It's a traffic machine, communications machine. The World Wide Web, that I could probably say maybe that's just all the websites that are all over the world. But what was I going to say? Oh yeah, okay. So you can see real quick how you got a planet here, and you've got tons of boy, I could just sit here and draw it forever. But you got links to links to links to links to links. Just everything is just. So now, internet, it starts looking like a fishnet. If you can picture a fishnet covering the planet, and each place the net connects together is a building with a router running traffic. You want to go to this IP address, well, you got to go here, 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 here. Routers are running it all over the place. Web looks like a spider web too. World Wide Web. You could picture a spider web covering the planet. Every interconnect point is something, is there. So, bottom line, everything is connected to everything on this planet. Your computer sits here, which has a wire connecting to somebody's computer in New York one way or another, which is connected to somebody in Seattle one way or another. So if I want to talk to your computer and I know its IP address, I can talk to your computer. That's the good side of the internet. That's the bad side of the internet, because somebody here can hack your computer if you got security problems. So the next would be there are reserved IP addresses. The IANA or whatever, Internet Assigned Numbers Authority, says no IP address beginning with 192, whoops, can be assigned, or 10, and I think there's some other ones. You cannot assign that to anything on this connect. Yeah, by the way, this is called WAN, Wide Area Network. So it's the whole globe is the WAN. And the funny thing too, there's also called LAN, which is a local area network. And I guess I'll draw, can I draw it in here? Yeah. Alright. Time Warner Cable is your internet service provider, and they're giving you an IP address which everybody can connect to. So if you change this out to a router, and there's plenty of them, there's Cisco, Netgear, all kinds of different routers, your router takes the WAN IP address, be it 74 point whatever. So now anybody can talk to your router. Who cares? Your router is a stupid device. It doesn't have, so to speak, really flaws, software, anything. Now you connect your computer to your router. And this is where this reserve number comes in, because if you're using, say, a Netgear, it's going to issue your computer 192 point something, point something, point something. So now anybody on the WAN can only talk to your router. They cannot talk to your IP address that your computer has. Only your router can talk to it. And you can have more than one computer, of course, on your router. This is called the LAN, Local Area Network. It's your local area, which I thought was funny because Time Warner Cable gets issued a block of IP addresses that they can assign to all their customers. Well, this is a LAN too, technically. It's Time Warner Cable's local area local area network talking to your router, which has its local area network, and Time Warner Cable now is talking to a wide area network, which could actually be a local area network itself. So, alright, so this is the safety behind having a router. You don't need your software firewall on, anything. Nobody can talk to your computer. You're behind a router, behind a firewall. Websites and emails. Well, there's hosting companies. There could be, this is GoDaddy. I think everybody knows that one. GoDaddy.com. They have a building with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of servers in it, and you can sign up and pay them, and they'll give you access to a space on their server where you can put your website. HTTP, Hypertext Telecommunication Protocol. You put your website up there, so if, for instance, you put test.com up there, somebody asks for test.com, this server says, here it is, and sends the website pictures and text all to you. So that's what there is. This is a hosting company. Tons of hosting companies all over the planet, and they also have another server, which is email. So if I'm sitting here and I send an email to test.com, it knows the IP address because it has the DNS server, whereas test.com sends the email to GoDaddy, who looks it up and says it goes into this email server and it sits here, and tells somebody over here, it could be on Cox, says give me my test.com email, and it comes down and it's downloaded off the server and erased. So that's, once the light bulb goes on, that the entire planet is wires connecting every single thing together, and there's routers running the traffic around, and it's, be it email, be it a website, be it files or anything like that. That's what the internet is. And the World Wide Web, I think you should probably just call it a bunch of websites or something all over the world. So I hope that helped explain something to somebody.